I just wanted to say a few remarks for the opening and then open it up really for discussion from you guys.
Oh, there's
Because,
more.
I'd like to hear where you stand on some of these issues that are plaguing Yahadut, the facts you know. The majority of Jews are very, very critical and non-accepting the traditional understanding, the primacy of the halakha, anything to do with God's existence and theology. A lot of neshamot just turn off and can't handle what that's all about. Okay, so I just want to make one or 2 points in the beginning. And that is, the first one is, like they said in this blurb, life is one's thoughts, feelings, and actions. This is straight out of the Kabbalah. When you translate the Sefirot into 3-4 classes, you have exactly this. You have cognition, and you have feelings, and you have action. Malchut is the action. The 6 Chesed Gvurah Torah Netzach Yisod is the domain of feelings, and the first 3 are the cognitive. And the big question there that I handled in the Hanukkah book was that there's only 10 Sefirot. It's really 5, but it goes into 10. 3, 6, and 1. In decimal terms, in the Ari, for example, it's 1.0 for Chesed Gvurah Tiferet, Ayin for Keter Bina Chachma, Keter Chachma Bina. It's 1.0, then it's 0.01 for Chesed Gvurah Tiferet, it gives you 0.6, and 0.01 for Malchut. And so these shiurim in decimal terms are right explicit in the Ari and is used in many different contexts in the text. Okay, but this basic orientation, other people have said that. That's no big chiddush from, that nobody says. If you look at the human being, it's composed of cognition, thoughts, speech has a special role to play, whatever, and then feelings and action. Okay, what's the point? The point is that when we're going to start to talk about religion, and I've been on the business of intimacy for the last 2, 3, 4 months, and we're talking about something personal. We're talking about something that somehow cannot be reduced to any of these 3. Because each one of these components exists in a field of the other 2. There is no thinking without feeling and action, however minimal, and there is no thinking without feeling and so forth. Psychologically, we're talking, not philosophically, psychologically, you can go on Google and get different types of studies that are trying to show you how these 3 operate. So what I'm trying to point out is that when we want to open a discussion tonight on the topic of, religion and of Yahadut, what's the whole thing all about and so forth, one has to realize that each one of these domains can mess up reality, especially the mind. The biggest falsifier of reality, and incidentally, the biggest guarantee of reality, is the mind. So, when we talk about experience, I talk here, I'm working on intimacy, we talk about love. Well, the word love doesn't say anything. What does it mean? As you see in the literature, if you look in the literature, you'll see the confusion today reigns unbelievable. I'm going to plan to make an analysis. Linda says I shouldn't do it. I'm going to do it anyway. I'm going to make an analysis of the pop songs, because my wife teaches English, and they teach English at Hartman through the songs. Not some of them are too erotic, they throw that out, so on. But when they found that one with halfway decent lyrics, they translate it into Hebrew, they fix up the lyrics. What the girls do at home is another story, but they teach the vocabulary from the song. And it seems to have worked, and the whole year she's been doing that. She stays up all night having to make these lesson plans for the girl. The girls are 12, 13, 14, and that's a big thing. Okay, so I'm getting an education. I'm watching the opera, because she's using the machine, and I'm watching the concert. And then she comes in, she's finished. Okay, good. And then sure enough, she says, okay, well, the opera Bezzo is 95. And then 94 is the pop music from England. Oh, the pop number one today is this and that. Well, I got a fantastic education. Unbelievable. I listened to the lyrics of these pop songs, and you see a repeat of one type of lyrics that indicates one classification of intimacy, of her husband-wife intimacy. Because what are they talking about?
That's
love, infatuation, huh?
Husband-wife is very generous.
Well, okay. But anyway, so you can get, of course, I knew that, everybody knows that. The arts, studying the media, studying Hollywood, gives you some indications as to the character of the culture. It's nothing, that's water. There's nothing new, about. However, I never realized that I'm going to be sitting there listening to these lyrics and seeing it bangs you on the head, and made me think of, well, what would have to be changed, for example, in the lyrics to bring out another dimension of intimacy, okay? Because one dimension of intimacy is like the woman is strong or the man is strong. And it's a kind of a strength relationship. Another kind of intimacy has an interdependence, where the two are, each one has different kinds of functions and roles and all about whatever. And what I saw on these pop songs is that it's these two modes of intimacy that are being revealed and talked and sung by everybody in the country. When you plug in, on one of my two lectures it says 50 people. On the Einstein lecture about Jewishness, there's 500 people. Over here it's 5 million. The songs, plug in the song on YouTube, and you're dealing with big numbers. Staggering, unbelievable. Anyway, the point I wanted to make tonight, and I don't want to get into that tonight, I want to talk about that, because I think even to play a few things and see for yourself, you'll see for yourself exactly this as exemplified in these pop songs. Then it dawned on me, if I knew something about music and knew something about ballet and so on, it's all open. Because when I watched the thing, for example, I saw a ballet from France, contemporary, and they didn't have any clothes on. Now, I never saw that before in ballet. I always saw some kind of a clothes. Well, this was a contemporary ballet, which was in the nude. I mean, okay, it was news to me. I never saw that before in my life. I watched ballet and so on. I enjoyed the music and all that. Okay, so I'm saying if I knew art and I knew music, one could compare. I like Baroque and Bach, and some other people like more in the modern period, and other people like the brass. Tremendous, Shostakovich, and I don't know what. I'm listening to the thing because also Wagner, it's 100th anniversary of Wagner, and on Mezzo they're putting all of the Wagner pieces, and I want to see if there's anything actually in the music, or I don't have the libretto, or the German, but I want to see if there's any of these Nazi motifs. Remember, he's writing early, he's not writing now in 1933. 1933, the party was already developed and so on. Okay, so I wanted to see, does he deal with workers, how do they dress on stage, just to see if to get some experience with the thing. But this is open for everybody. Once you see the problem, and the relevance of the problem, as I hope will come out tonight in the discussion, and you see the relevance of the problem, it's open for others to do when I don't know enough to do that. I can't do that. But it gives you a picture of the culture. it gives you a picture, because all the songs are about love and so on and so on. So the only point I wanted to make as a entry is that there's a subtlety here with the use of language, the use of the words, the shift from the cognitive to the experiential and back and forth and so forth. And strictly speaking, in language, no language will capture the experience. It has, you could, look, if you looked in a dictionary of synonyms, when you use the word love, or any one word, to talk about intimacy, there's love, sub-anger, sub-jealousy, sub-this, sub-bodily. Go down the list, you'll have 5,000 at least. Love. Love, you can't use words like that. You can't use words like that. They don't have enough meaning to relate to the experience. So we do the best we can. That's why sometimes in doing the best we can, we make metaphors and we mess up language in such a way to get across the mystery dimension, the part that we can't capture. Okay, anyway, this is the basic point that I wanted to make tonight. And now I want to open up the story about, what's this? Okay, so the first thing I wanted to deal with before we open up the discussion is, okay, to show you this and illustrate it clearly, Chazal say a Torah thinker should be responsible to restructure the Torah system in his kufa. Reb Chaim made it a chiyuv, that if you have chidushim, you're mechuyav, it's not a reshut, it's a chiyuv to give them out to others. Okay. So I say I'm a Torah person. Good, Torah person. Am I a Torah person? How do you know? How do you know? I happen to be a person, I'm a Torah person. Well, here. See? It's a list. If you saw this list, right? You saw this list. It's from one of the books, you know, the other publications of the author. So look at the list. There's 18 items. So you say, whoa, this guy's a Torah man, a Torah person, okay? I mean, he's dealing, look at his subjects, look at the stuff he's talking about, look at his teaching, look at his this and this and this. Well, how do we know that that's the case? What's primary? For example, when I was a kid and grew up, I was a ball player. I played from morning till night. But I always was second best. I always was chosen second. We used to go like this, like this, and then choose the sides. Then we play stickball, punchball, whatever we play. Yours truly was always picked. I didn't stand on the sideline because I was a great ball player. But I never was first. I still remember the guy, Benny Benaldo, we used to call him. He was first. I was never first. When I went to high school, I went to the New York School of Printing, a vocational school, right? And they had 3 medals that were given out to the people, to the best of this. But the medal went with a job offer to the old printing houses in New York, which were very anti-Semitic. And Levinson was voted the smartest in the yearbook, but did not get any of the awards. They gave all 3 medals the first time in the history of the school. They gave all 3 medals to one guy named Joe Marioni. So the big Joe got nothing, and the little Joe, who was good, I mean, they were, of course, 1 medal, 2 medals, but they couldn't give a Jew a job offer. Now, I went to college. Okay, they didn't know anything about that. They knew you're going to college, you're going to be a shop teacher, whatever it is. Okay, but so I say, how do you know that what's operating primarily was love of Torah, and you can think about intimacy in relationships, and not ego needs of me, the person. Where the going into the field, going into philosophy for the God problem, okay, was serving something else. It was serving my personality needs. Now, that sort of softens up the idea of Torah person. It doesn't mean it's exclusive because we have different dimensions of the personality, but it certainly puts a little damper on the words, on Torah thinker. Torah thinker means first love. I asked the question about the Rav. I said, look, it remains in the personal, and I don't know anything about the personal, so it remains personal, but the Rav called himself Ish HaHalacha. Ish, in biblical Hebrew, is an important person and a general person, an average person. And in many contexts, it's Ish as an important person, which relates then to intimacy. So I can't say anything about the Rav who called himself Ish HaHalacha, meaning his work. He'll give you a sheet that's chock full of all the stuff, the beautiful things that he put out. But was he operating? What was the base? One love. One love. Kierkegaard wrote a book, Purity of Heart is to will one thing. One love. Was it ego? What were his ego needs? How can we write about his view of intimacy without knowing all of these things? Did it carry over to his relationships with his wife? He wrote about intimacy. I thanked him. If he didn't open the door, I wouldn't write about it. Let it lay. He opened the door. He opened the door. Other people can come in and criticize and analyze and develop and so on and so on, because the Rav was a leader of 20th century Jewish philosophy and Judaism. But there are certain things that remain open. I said, look, it's privacy. I could talk about myself, my relationship, but I can't talk about the Rav. But all these questions arise from this beginning point of feelings, cognition, and action that somehow I learned very fast, early. Intellect covers up a lot of your fears. Intellect makes rationalizations of things, which takes responsibility. You lose responsibility and other things. In other words, the subtlety of the interconnection of these three domains makes very difficult to understand things like intimacy or religious personality or religious sensitivity. So as an opener, I wanted to just get across this subtlety that's involved. And now to go to have an open discussion on really what's this all about. Yeah.
I didn't quite. I don't think we quite got to the idea of simcha and the effect of God language on it.
Okay. As you know, in Dvorim, there's a big section there about the Klalot, and the text says that Lo Bashamayim He, and I gave you a great law, a legal system, okay? Fantastic legal system. And I'm worried, Moshe Rabbeinu says in his farewell address, he says, I should preface it by saying, as you heard before, it's a farewell address, okay, but it's not the farewell that they're leaving to go into Canaan. Moshe Rabbeinu took the opportunity to talk about the future, meaning the King's period, historically. He took the opportunity to talk in his farewell speech about things that are worrying him about what's going to happen to his people later. And one of the things he says in the famous line is that they're going to keep the law without simcha. And that's a way of putting one of the problems of today. In relation to Judaism, the mitzvot system, the Kavod Chazal, and different aspects of the system, the question is, we seem to have lost the simcha dimension. And instead of simcha, we have resentment. In every obligation, especially in an open society that's fostered and given chizuk by the political, of the notion of privacy and so on. So people don't like to be told what to do. Which another way of saying is that in every obligation, there's a piece of resentment. Even in the intimacy talk, which I've been working on for the last few months, when you have a relationship that is built on mutual obligation, or tit for tat, you give me and I'll give you, and so on. When it's carried to the extreme, it's degradation. If a woman says, I won't give you sex, because, well, I mean, oh my God, how can you have a relation of intimacy if you're having threats back and forth between husband and wife? I mean, there's something amiss. Okay, but in the higher level, when it's interdependent, and not one ruling the other, because there may be a dimension of obligation, it takes on a resentment. The husband, he's obligated to do the dishes. He's obligated. He sees that as an obligation. And if he doesn't do it, we should know how many times the text or the soap opera will say, you know, the wife got mad at him because he didn't fulfill what he said he was going to do. He was going to fix the light bulb, do this, this is part of the picture. Well, part of the root of that is, that's not him. That's not his essence. That's not his whole makeup. There's a difference between the woman and the man. In all the literature that comes through today, the woman is giving and receiving love, and the masculine part is knowing who the person is. I call it first love. There's a first love of work, of what makes the person, why did he come into they use things like, why did he come into the world? When did he discover who he really is? Can we really? That's part of this complexity. But there is this differentiation, and then they talk about masculinity and femininity, and the two fit together, but they are not the same. Men and women are totally different when it comes to intimacy and relationships. They're two different things, and that's at least I found it for me, by going over the material and thinking it through and writing and so forth and so on, I realized that at least it gives a little bit of structure to the whole topic, because otherwise the words, I love you, you know, I'll be there for you forever, until death do us part, and the language just goes on everything. I'm going to talk about that now, infatuation and love. Well, if you listen to the tapes, they use the word love, but it's really talking about infatuation from the lyrics. Never mind the pictures. I don't watch the pictures, but you know, the lyrics itself, without the visual part, indicate that there's a mishmash in the language. So to me, that was a big discovery. And I found it in the Chumash. In the Chumash, with the notion of Ish. Every wife is called Eshet. Tzipora has 2 lines in the text, but she's called Eshet Moshe. Esav's wife is called Eshet Esav. Now I know people today who, not too many, when they are introduced to somebody or in a social context and they say, what's your name? They answer, I'm the husband of so-and-so, I'm the wife of so-and-so. In other words, there's something in the relationship that automatically puts the person talking, in some kind of a different context, where the immediate answer is, oh, I'm the wife of Yaakov, I'm the wife of Yosef, I'm the wife of... Okay, and then if you follow it through, in the stories and in the narratives, you'll find these little points being exemplified. I didn't do them all. I did some in the original Perush, and they're all open to what I call anthropological analysis, psychological, cultural, and so forth, to see how the culture has in it certain kinds of things that, how they come back to be modern, they do. What can I tell you? Intimacy is a perennial problem. I mean, there were men and women and sexuality and this and that and so on. Okay. So today, we've lost the life dimension, the keeping the law out of simcha, out of joy, and not merely out of obligation. Some people need obligation, other people don't. As you know, in the early book that I wrote, called The Monotheism of Moses, I showed that Moses is non-theist. He doesn't believe in God, and to use simple language, I say non-theist, because it's not a... Atheism is already a... Atheism, then it's negation. Non means it's irrelevant. It didn't enter. It was part of the culture. It was a God culture. Gods all over the place. But Moshe understood what he got and who he was. And he understood he's not God, he's not doing God. God didn't talk to him and all the rest of the thing. Of course, I don't expect anybody to accept it because you say it explodes the religion. It's not true. Because in the second book, the first was the Secret Silence of Moses, and the second book was the Monotheism of Moses. He had a monotheism, but it was limited to one question: origin of the universe. But that's all. And the halacha, the law, to me, is 100% human product made by first Moses and then Ezra. When all that Gemara material talks about Ezra to be like Moshe and so on, Ezra redacted, he received traditions, some writing, some orally, whatever it was, from the ancient world, and he was part of Anshe Knesset Agdola, which is late. You're talking about 600 BCE, whereas before with Moshe Rabbeinu, we're talking about 1400 BCE. Okay, so there is this whole picture that comes through in the text. So it's a modern problem. I mean, what happened to the joy? What was Moshe worried about? Because it's going to degrade. Over time, it's going to fester. Over time, the psychological package that accompanies obligation begins to affect the couple, affect you, affect me. And it relates to our behavior, actional behavior, what shuls we go to, where we're going to live, and so on, so on, so on, so on. So this is the thing about the Simcha point, that again, it's a big Torah point, and our job is to work it out. How do we work it out? What's included and what's excluded? And I say there is a place to reconstruct, reconceptualize the halacha. I said many times, there's a law of conscience in the system. Like in the West, there's a law of conscience. The guy doesn't want to go to the army. He has a law of conscience, according to the amendment, right? Bill of Rights. And he pays the consequence. He goes to jail or whatever. I say the same thing here. There's a law of conscience in relation to Torah. I don't like the way they treat women. It makes my blood boil. So, don't keep it. When I was in the hospital with my mother, I told you that story. So there was he saw me with a kippah and Shari Tzedek. So I was there all night, and helping the nurse, calling and this. And there was a guy there from California. His father was on the machine, on the breathing machine. And he saw me with a kippah. He said, look, I see you're a religious guy. Because on Shari Tzedek, they don't pull the plug, So he says, my father's brain dead. I'm here 3 weeks. I'm doing nothing. I'm just walking, pacing the floor. He can't get better. He's brain dead. And they still keep him on the machine. is this the Torah system? Is this? Now, so again, you see, here's somebody who was so involved and so misguided and so annoyed, he couldn't sleep. He couldn't do anything. And you saw from his face and from talking to him 2-3 nights in a row, he was a serious, sensitive person. But he just couldn't relate to the thing. And then we said, what would you do? And so, is there a place for pulling? And he says, I could go in there. They're not watching me. I could take the plug out. And so, but anyway, this was the topic. So again, it applies to across the board to all kinds of things. And especially to intimacy, there's a unbelievable, as you know, connection between religion and intimacy, male-female, husband-wife intimacy. I venture to suggest that that's a fundamental topic that has to be brought in discussing anything about how the person relates to Yahadut, to Judaism. A person who is, quote, happy, has a higher level, shall we say, a higher level intimacy relation, of husband-wife intimacy, looks at everything else different than a person who doesn't have it. There are some relationships that are built on infatuation. And infatuation is different. Because over time, infatuation weakens, dissolves. And some of the aberrations that come with extramarital relations and 7-year itch and all this kind of stuff come from the degrading of this whole picture. So I think because it's personal, it has to relate also to discussion of the issues. I myself, I made my whole life on 2 cylinders. I was a thinking person that taught and read probably more than anybody else in the country, and taught and lived in accordance with understanding, search for truth. That's why I went for the God issue. So I studied. I got nowhere.
Chasing
like Reb Chaim said, you got a great education. I heard you're a great philosopher, you know the damn thing about Torah. Because what about the feeling dimension? What about my feelings? What about my relation with my wife, with my children, with so on? What happened to that? It was swallowed up in an overkill, pardon the pun, an overkill on intellect. Listening to students. I prepared 25 hours a week to give a lecture. Okay? And when I gave lectures, I knew what the student's going to say as soon as they open their mouth. But once in 25 times, the student opens their mouth and they say something, and I say, oh my God, I didn't think about it. What time is it? 10 to the hour? Go out for a coffee, see your girlfriend, I'll talk about it next week. Sometimes you get caught. Sure, I prepared. I knew what they're going to say before they open their mouth. But it means I didn't listen. I had to learn over the years how to listen. So it affected my whole orientation. I mentioned once, I used to say, philosophy is the queen of the sciences. I had mathematician friends and physicists. You're a regular group, you know. I was in Williamsburg, guys were educated guys and so on, you know. And then I would say, whoa, you know, you're not so big because you work at Brookhaven and you're doing this and you're working on an atomic bomb and blah, 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 and you're a physicist, you know, or you're a mathematician. I say, wait a minute, what is a number? I don't know. I can tell you some equations in number theory and so on, but I can't, and when I read a few biographies, Hilbert, one of the great mathematicians, used to come in and say, you know, what is a number? And he wrote it on the board, and after he said, well, now we'll start doing mathematics. In other words, I said, oh yeah, Philosophy is the queen of the sciences. Because philosophy studies what you accept. You accept that a number has some kind of a range of meaning and truth and blah, 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 usability. When Joe Levinson came along and said, for ego needs, what happened to what do I know about mathematics? What are you putting your 2 cents in? Or I used to say, I philosophize with a sword. I don't use that phrase today. 50 years later, I don't use a phrase like that. Because at that time, yes, kill the guy. Put the burden of exposition on the other guy that he walks away from the discussion saying, wow, whew, this guy is great, this guy is a genius, this guy is this, and this guy is this, and this guy, and I can't know what the hell I answer. But there was another dimension. I missed the whole dimension for my whole life. So I say, Baruch Hashem, I got it toward the end. Beseder, better late than never, we say. But I'm a total different person when I discovered all of this. You guys heard from before about when I wrote on the proclamation. I wrote a book, an essay on the proclamation of the state. And it was at one of the places here, you know, and for a postdoctoral. And I always thought that they was, since because they were to the left, they didn't like the idea of me putting a Jewish overtone on the document. Look, the Medina Yisrael is one of the biggest things in Jewish history. So I put it said, as liberty, justice, and peace understood by the prophets. So I said, well, what did the prophets mean? Now the guys who signed the document, they meant, you know what it is, don't you? Liberty, justice, and peace. You live in a democracy. The prophets were first. They talk about it. But that's not quite the case. The prophets were part of the Masorah tradition. So yours truly developed a whole set of materials that had a surface meaning and an underlying meaning. The underlying meaning was from Torah, and the surface meaning was from democracy and all the rest of the stuff. Good. When I was decided, I never got it published. It's already 40 years. And I decided maybe the time is to publish it. So I took it out of the mothballs, read the manuscript, and I thought they didn't renew, because after I handed in the first 80 pages, they didn't renew the contract. So they let me go. I said, okay. So I thought, well, maybe there were 2 left, and they let me go. They, you know, look, if they can't publish it eventually under their auspices, why are we paying a guy for postdoctoral to do something like that? Okay, we can't. So, what did I notice? I was going to say now I'm going to redo the book and everything else from a different perspective and so on, much richer. And lo and behold, the title of the thing is On the Proclamation of Independence of Medina Yisrael, subtitle, Life, Mind, and Time. Huh? It's in a typed copy. Of course they didn't renew it. They saw right away. This guy isn't interested in the proclamation. He's interested in using the proclamation to talk about life, mind, and time, which were big metaphysical physics questions that were bothering me when I came to the country. I mean, from coming from abroad. So they didn't renew because it was left or politics. They renewed because they said, what are we paying for nothing? We want a book on the proclamation. And to put the icing on the cake, I said, liberty, justice, and peace as understood by the prophets. It doesn't say understood. It says as envisioned. You look in the text, it's in the kitchen there, hanging on the wall. And when you look at the document, and then the translation in the Hebrew, it doesn't say as understood by the prophets. It says as envisioned by the prophets. It's a totally different meaning. They were all in the Messianic frame in 1948. So on, so on, so on, so on. But I was so wrapped up in trying to understand what is it saying, what's the truth, what do these terms mean, what's the state based on? And since they said liberty, justice, and peace understood by the prophets, it opened the door for some crazy guy to come and say, okay, I'll show you what the prophets meant. And they didn't mean exactly democratic equality, freedom, justice, and so on and so on. But I was so involved in it, I didn't even quote it right. Just as an illustration of how you can get so wrapped up in an orientation with such a dominance, in this case intellection, search for truth, that I lost a lot of life and a lot of intellection on other problems.